Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry to Gar-Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it!
Suns have swept the Denver Nuggets. The Suns are going to the conference finals.
Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Rushed by George defensively. Booker waiting with it. He's way out on the perimeter now. Booker lobs it for Ayton. Ayton looks, goes over to Rubio. Rubio on the drive. Waits, shoots. The shot is not good. Rebound Zubats. He loses it. Suns get it back to Rubio. Time. 6 seconds left in the game. Out to Booker. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Booker on the drive. Goes up. Here's the shot. Shoot! Booker! And the Suns win the game. Devin Booker at the buzzer puts it up and puts it in. Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the Western Conference finalist Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCulley, and I am joined, as always, by my friend and co-host. His name is David Nash. David, what's going on, man?
Max, it was 3 words to open last time, and this time they might be even better and perhaps more immortalized with other events that have gone on, but Suns in 4.
Suns in 4. Man, that's a fun rallying cry we have now, right? That's a good one. I like that. I'm looking forward to, I really hope whether it's game 1 or game 3, our first home game, there better be Suns in 4 chance.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Bucks in 6 that goes around and has been around for many, many years on Bucks Twitter at the moment. And yeah, we've got our own rallying cry and plenty of different things going on around it. But the best part of all, we get to pod again. I'm very happy about that. Not to say that I'm not excited about our team going on in the Western Conference, but it means we get to come together and talk about them some more, which I'm really excited to do again today.
Yeah, I remember during the Lakers podcast, I was talking about how we'll do this, for each series, and thinking like, I don't know if we're going to have another one, but yeah, this is our third one of these, and I really hope we get 4, David. Let's hope for 4.
Yeah, let's go for 5, hey? Let's get greedy.
I'm down for 5. So, as everyone listening to this right now knows, the last few days haven't been particularly stable, I wouldn't say. You may have noticed, if you're looking at your timestamps, that this episode's about half as long as our playoff episodes have generally been. I mean, assuming we keep this where it should be. We wanted to try to find a time to record when people still wanted to hear about Denver and the Denver series, but also while we were reasonably sure what our Western Conference Finals opponent would be. That just didn't happen.
Yeah.
So instead, we decided to break up our normal episode into 2 parts, and this is the first part that you're listening to now. We're going to recap the Denver series in this one. We're going to spend the bulk of our time giving out 5 stars. We're going to do Did You Know? We're going to finish with a few random things that we want to talk about for the Denver series. We're then going to record part 2, our Western Conference Finals preview. We're thinking Sunday afternoon Phoenix time. There's a chance that Game 1 will have already occurred by that point, David?
There is.
If that is the case, we'll react to Game 1 and preview the rest of the series. But if that is Game 7, because Jazz forced it, we'll be fresh off learning who our opponent is, and we'll do the full series preview just like we did with Lakers and Nuggets. Either way, we'll finish up with 7 seconds or less next episode to complete what would normally be 1 episode. David, did I miss anything in that wildly overlong explanation?
I think that covers pretty much everything. Anyone listening should have a pretty good idea right now. But the way we've been talking about it, the best way for the listeners to think about it is think of it as one big, long 7 seconds or less podcast, which they tend to be anyway, but we're going to break it up into 2. So, yeah, no 7 seconds or less segment at the end of this one. That'll come at the end of part 2. So it really is just going to be one big, long podcast for people to hopefully listen to in 2 different parts when each part is, I guess, more relevant to the conversation, Max.
Yeah, David, some would say this is 2 podcasts for the price of 1, which is $0. $0. But before we get into anything, how about a recap, David?
Let's do it, Max. Our Phoenix Suns swept the number 3 seed Denver Nuggets 4-0 to advance to the Western Conference Finals. Game 1, 122-105. Mikal had 23 and 5. Paul had 21 and 11. Book had 21 and 8. And Ayton had 20 and 10 in Game 1. Moved to Game 2, 123-98. Book 18 and 10, Paul 17 and 15. Mikhail had 16 points and Ayton 15 and 10. So the same 4 again from both of those first home games. We moved to game 3, Max, 116 to 102. Book had 28, 6 and 4. Paul had 27, 6 and 8 and started really looking like himself again. Jay Crowder had 14 and 4 to break the 4-player streak there. And Ayton had 10 and 15 again. He was very consistent through this series, if you're not picking up on that already. And game 4, close it out, 125 to 118. Paul, 37 and 7, which I can't wait to talk to you about in a minute, Max. Book, 34, 11 rebounds and 4 assists. Mikhail had such a Mikhail game, 14, 6, 2, 1 and 1. And Jay Crowder had 9, 10 rebounds and 4 blocks. Probably should have been 5, but they didn't count one of them, I don't think. And you may have sensed a trend there. We almost went 122, 123, 124, and 125 in the 4 games in a row. But game 3 tripped us up there, Max, when they only got to 116. But I thought that was quite funny when I was writing everything down. We'll get into a bit more of a recap in a second, but we always like to do this. Favorite moment from the series, Max?
Oof, I didn't know you were going to ask me this. That's a tough one. I mean, there's quite a few, honestly. But I think for me, it's still the Corey Craig alley-oop, because it's ancient history now. But if people remember, we were down 10 points in the third quarter of game 1.
Yep.
And that was the moment when it was like, oh, we're definitely winning this game, and it really feels like we're winning this series. I was there for it, which that was fun too.
That always helps. I'm very jealous of the people that have been able to go and see a couple of these games so far in the playoffs. For me, it was pick any number of times that they hunted Michael Porter Jr. on the defensive end, and we'll get into that much later in the episode. And off the court, chugging with the fellas, really taking off, Max, and you got involved, I believe, during the Denver series, actually. So that'll be a moment that I always remember this series by as well. This is the part where we normally go into health. Abdel Nader, obviously, still on the injury report with that knee. And we're not burying the lead here, guys. The obvious one is CP3, which we'll also get to in a minute here, Max. But some other news this week, which we don't often get to do anymore, not doing these podcasts very much. So I thought I'd run through that really quickly as well. CP3 made All-NBA second team. I believe Booker was 10th on the leaderboard there amongst guards, which I cannot believe. Mikhail missed the all-defensive teams by 1 spot. He was essentially 11 out of 10 when it came to those teams, Max. Tibbs got Coach of the Year over Monty, coming second, obviously. And Jokic, we just swept him, but in the middle there, he got his MVP trophy. And our own Chris Paul was 5th in the voting there. Another question without notice for you here, Max. Which Suns player or coach should feel the most robbed by their non-inclusion in one of those awards, Max?
I think Monty, for sure. I'm kind of stunned. I'm kind of stunned. I thought he was going to win for sure. I would have bet quite a bit of money on that. Mikhail missing it sucked. I think he should have gotten it, but I think the guys above him were all really good defenders besides Kawhi. Not that Kawhi's not a good defender. He just didn't have the season that Mikhail had this season. And then the Booker thing. Listen, he shouldn't have finished 10th. That was insane. But I bet people remember that the first half of the season wasn't spectacular for him. And also we're in the middle of the playoffs where he's played his best basketball of the season by far. So I think, there's a little bit of, maybe lack of memory of what it was like before. I think it was okay for him not to make it, given the guys in front of him, but to be 10th was insane.
Yeah, that was the bit that really shocked me. I wasn't expecting him to make it, and there was even the leaks a few days out beforehand, so it's not like it was a huge surprise when we didn't see his name there. But, I said it, this team's all chip on their shoulder now, Max, and that's kind of how I like them. And as long as we're in the playoffs and those guys are playing that way, wanting to prove everyone wrong, I really don't see much issue with us missing out on a few of these awards.
Well, the other thing too, David, is that now that they've done this, and especially if they keep going far, I don't think they're going to be missing out on awards quite as much.
That is very true, as we saw with a few of those. Kawhi most notably in the all-defensive teams. You kind of get them on reputation after a few years, so we're building that reputation, but we won't let the listeners wait any longer. We should, I guess, re-mention again, it is Thursday night US time while we record this, and Friday afternoon where I am in Australia, and I know we have a few Australian listeners, so just time stamping that one for you guys. CP3 in health and safety protocols, Max. That's the big news of right now. We should probably just run over what we know.
Yeah, so what we know, I mean, a lot of what we know is not exactly like well-sourced particularly.
Yep.
I guess the best thing we have is from Woj this morning on ESPN, I think on Get Up, where he essentially said, it's not that bad. It looks like they're thinking, he'll miss one game if it's on Sunday.
Yep.
That seems pretty likely he'll miss that game if that happens. If it's not until Tuesday, there's a chance he comes back, a chance he misses it. But it sounds like whether it's game 2 or game 3, I think would be Thursday. I think he'll probably be back for that based on what we're hearing, assuming all goes well. I don't know if that's what you think too.
Yeah, and we got that word that then the next official, I guess, word from the team or the league will come on Saturday US time. So probably by the time some people are listening to this one, and definitely by the time we record part 2 of this long episode, we should hopefully have at least a little bit more clarity on what it's going to look like for Chris Paul missing those first couple of games, I suppose, and I guess more clarity on when that first game will be as well by the time we record as well. I'm not a newsbreaker, neither of us are, Max, but I do like that you noted that there's not a lot of well-sourced information out there at the moment. There's a lot of people trying to capitalize on the lack of information, I would say. I would just say, based on what I know and I've been told by people that I trust, that there is quite a lot that's incorrect out there at the moment, and I'm expecting at least what Woj said this morning, where he misses game 1, to probably be the most likely outcome, and fingers crossed it's no more than that, Max.
Yeah, I think, and the issue with, I don't know how much we're going to get into this, but I want the Clippers to win. I think all Suns fans do right now, because it looks like Kawhi will probably not be in that series if we play against them.
Yeah.
But I think there also is a real chance that we don't have Paul for the first 2 games if that happens. Let's say if it happens tomorrow night, because Clippers can still win Game 7. That's the ideal scenario. But if Clippers win Game 6, I think there's a chance he misses both games. His Game 2 would be on Tuesday.
Yeah, and that's going to be really tough to overcome. Obviously, home games. I said it online not long ago. I almost, particularly with the CP3 news, almost prefer the Utah, I guess, schedule, where we would go to Utah for the first 2 games with the sole intention of just trying to pinch one. But I agree with you that the Clippers without Kawhi are probably the more favourable matchup. But unfortunately, that just means, because we finished with a higher record than them, that the first 2 games are going to be at our home, and we would really need to make sure we take care of home court there, with or without CP3, Max.
Yeah, it's sort of, I definitely get your point there, where like it's the stakes are lower for a loss.
Yeah.
But we also certainly have a much better chance to win with that home crowd behind them. Without CP3 also, so it's kind of an interesting trade back and forth. But yeah, no, if we lost Game 1 at home to the Clippers, that would be not a great thing. So I see where you're coming with that one.
Yeah. We've done it a little bit without CP3. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise that he did get that little shoulder injury early on in the Lakers series, because it's not like we're being stunned out of nowhere in how to play without Chris Paul, even though they've definitely looked a hell of a lot better with a healthy Chris Paul on the court in the playoffs so far. And that's probably a great segue for us to get into 5 stars here, Max.
Yes, the last thing I'll say on this is that by all accounts, the symptoms, he's either experiencing no symptoms or very light symptoms, which is good for his prognosis in terms of when he comes back, how he'll play, right? If he was really, really suffering badly from this thing, it could really affect him when he comes back still. But hopefully, the fact that he's vaccinated, he's barely suffering symptoms as far as we know, or none at all.
Yeah.
That's a good sign for him going forward. But yes, as you said, maybe this is going to be a good segment to 5 stars, David. So I will say, we've never had a harder 5-star segment in history of this show. I don't think it's remotely close. Do you agree?
I definitely agree.
The first one, we just kind of hinted that there is not hard, but there's maybe 5 players who deserve 5 stars here, and a couple more who maybe deserve 3 or 4 stars. Like, this is a stacked group, and I want to say very, very clearly right now, please don't get mad at us for giving certain people 2 stars or 3 stars here, because there are 4 guys who definitely deserve 5 stars, and we can't give them all 5 stars,
Yeah, we thought the last time was pretty clear. I think you and I just flipped on 3 stars and 2 stars there, but then we even got some replies on Twitter from people who were throwing other people in the mix, and that's the beauty of this system. It's the beauty of why we loved doing it on a week-to-week basis for a while there on the old regular podcast, because everyone sees the game just a little bit differently, and none of us are right or wrong. It's a very subjective thing. So I can't wait to see whether you and I differ on a couple of these because it was incredibly tough to decide a couple of the places.
I will say this first one is not subjective, it's objective, and if you don't have this guy, you are wrong. The 5-star player is Chris Paul. I'll go through his series stats first. He averaged 25.5 points a game, 5 rebounds, 10.3 assists to 1.3 turnovers, 1.5 steals, 63% from the field, 75% from 3, 100% from the line on 5.5 free throw attempts per game, all good for a 74.3% true shooting percentage. But David, before I let you talk, I have to do Chris's fourth quarter stats. In the fourth quarters of this series, all 4 combined, Chris made 16 of his 19 shots. He made 4 of his 4 threes. He made 7 of his 7 free throws. He had 10 assists and 0 turnovers. He had a 97.4% true shooting percentage on the 43 points he scored in those 4 quarters. The rest of the starters combined to score 39 in the fourth quarters. He scored 43. David, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better or more efficient performance in a playoff sweep.
It was unbelievable to watch. What a performance. I just can't remember the last time I saw a Phoenix Suns player put on that kind of a performance, particularly...
You haven't.
Yeah, particularly in the fourth quarter, as you said. He just took over whenever he wanted, did whatever he wanted. I remember maybe halfway through the series, Michael Malone, I know he gets upset at Mike, said that, CP3 wasn't feeling them. They weren't touching him. They weren't having any effect. And his words had no effect on the team because that continued right through the 4 games. The 10.3 assists to 1.3 turnovers is just absolutely insane. Those fourth quarter numbers you read out are just absolutely insane. And I tweeted about this earlier today. Not sure if you saw it, but I'll throw one more absolutely insane stat into the mix here. He scored 16.5 points per game on pull-ups in this series on 63.3%.
Good Lord.
Unbelievable.
Good Lord. That is stupid numbers. People who, I'm sure a lot of people don't like browse pull-up numbers very often, but that is stupid. And also the volume there is stupid too. I think Suns fans, they won't be surprised to hear, it's amazing, but we watched him play. Whenever he pulled up from the elbow in this series, he made the shot. Maybe he missed 1 or 2. They don't come to mind though. And it's not like he was doing this when it didn't matter. I gave the fourth quarter numbers, but in the few moments where this series was a little bit dicey, I would say game 1, fourth quarter, beginning of fourth quarter, and then game 4, obviously, got a little dicey.
Yep.
That's when he was at his very, very best. You asked me earlier what my favorite moment of the series was. I think one of them was watching Chris Paul in person in the fourth quarter of game 1 do what he did. I think he went 6 for 6. He had the step back 3, and he had an and 1, and he was just, you can't. There's no words to give him, David. If this was a 100 out of 100 thing, we're grading out of 100,
yep.
I would give him 100 out of 100. There's nothing to ding him on.
There's really not much to nitpick, if anything, as you said. I just love that switch that he had. I actually went back and watched game 1 in prep for this because it just felt so long ago, even though we swept them, to try and get a handle on the whole series and make sure I wasn't just focusing too much on those last couple of games. We were 9 points down in the third quarter in that game, and I just totally removed that from my mind. And you said he was the one that kind of flicked the switch, and I just, it wasn't any particular moment, just the whole series, that switch that he has to just go into scorer mode. Maybe it is a little bit of recency bias. I love Steve Nash, my favorite ever Phoenix Sun, but, we would always comment during and in retrospect that he just didn't score enough. And, he had big nights in the playoffs, but that was particularly when I guess the other team was game planning for him to get his and to try and take everyone else out.
Yep.
Whereas Chris just seems to have this switch that he can just go back and forth between bringing guys in and then being like, all right, no one else has got it at the moment. I'm just going to score 5 buckets in a row. And it's just incredible to watch. Max, here's a question for you. He had 59 field goals made in this series. How many would you guess were assisted?
Oh, not very many at all. So he's 59 total. I would say 10?
Half it.
Wow. Only 5 of his makes were assisted?
Only 5.
That is just insane. And as you pointed out, and I don't want it to sound like we're hating on Nash here. Nash himself has said he didn't shoot enough.
Correct.
And part of it's just the era. Part of it, that's just the way guys played then versus now.
Yeah.
But we've never seen a Suns player. I mean, I've never seen a Suns player in my lifetime do what Chris Paul did in this series. I mean, maybe the closest thing would be Barkley in the '93 run, but I mean, Chris Paul was just immaculate. There was almost nothing wrong with him. And you mentioned, he went into scoring mode, but also, as we talked about, he averaged 10.3 assists and 1.3 turnovers. He went into everything mode. He had 1.5 steals in the series per game. He was just, I don't really know how you're going to criticize him. And the other thing I want to bring up with him, because this is more of an intangible thing, and obviously the intangibles with him are off the charts as well.
Yeah.
But I posted this on Twitter. After game 2, we had blown them out, and everyone was feeling great, and he was the, post-game interview.
Yeah.
And he was asked about, game 3, how are you feeling going into game 3? And he brought up immediately, the first thing he said was, well, it's going to be Jokic's MVP night, so we're going to have to respond to that energy. And to have somebody on your team who understands that, recognizes the importance of that, so much so that after he just played a game where he was awesome, the first thing that comes to his mind in front of that question is that.
Yeah.
That is something that like a podcaster would say. You know what I mean? It's not an NBA player thing. And the fact that he's locked in that way, it's just, man, it's so great to have him on the team. And there's just not enough good things to say about him.
I think he was even the one that brought up the fact that he was 2-0 up in a series against the Spurs, I think sometime in his career, and they lost it in 7. So
I remember that one. That was early on when the second round against them.
Yeah, the playoff experience term gets kind of thrown around a little too much for my liking. We've seen it with these Suns. So many people wanted to use that as a reason and why they wouldn't, I guess, get even this far in the current playoffs because of their lack of experience. But it's little things like that where you go, yeah, if you've got that guy in your locker room who's thinking directly of that straight after a game, as you said, it's something a podcaster would bring up probably after, researching for 48 hours or something before, after a game before having to record like we get to do. He's thinking about it literally as soon as the final buzzer sounds and he goes to that interview. And, that was really my final point on Chris that I wanted to make is this team's just really taken on his entire spirit, and you can really see it this year, and we're really seeing it in the playoffs. And Chris's love for the crowd in some of those post-game interviews as well, particularly in Denver, he seemed genuinely shocked at how many fans were in the stands supporting Phoenix at an away game. And it kind of made me wonder, I'm not sure he's felt this loved by a fan base for quite some time. I'm sure the OKC Thunder fans loved him, but everyone knew that team kind of had a bit of a cap on it and that his stay there was always going to be short-lived. So I don't think either side really embraced it. He was downright hated in Houston by, at least one faction of the fan base there that stuck with James Harden. And, pretty sour towards the end of his Clippers run, even though there was all that excitement at the beginning with Lob City starting and stuff. So he's probably 5 or 6 years removed from, feeling this genuinely embraced by the team that he's on. And it's just awesome to see him because he's just beaming in those interviews, as you mentioned.
Well, also, other than OKC, which, as you pointed out, was only there for 1 year and never had a real chance to contend, he was just on teams with bad fan bases, I would say. I mean, the Clippers are famously bad. The Pelicans back then, I guess they were the Hornets then, not good.
Yeah.
And then and the Rockets have always been pretty mediocre compared to other good teams when they're good.
Yeah.
And I think, the way the Sun, and spoiler alert, we may get to the fan base later in this podcast, David.
Okay.
The way Suns fans have performed in this playoff series and playoffs in general has been unbelievable. And I think he recognizes that as much as anybody. I mean, that stuff matters a lot. And Chris is finally getting the support that he's ever really had throughout his career. I mean, he's played in, Golden State games, playoff games, which are crazy. And he's played in, I'm sure, plenty of other I'm not thinking of with great fans. And he's finally getting the level of support he's seen. And I think he realizes how important that is. And then I'm with you, man. It's beautiful.
It really is. Last thing I would say on him, I'm not sure if you've got anything else to throw in, but I've kind of coined him the conductor during this series. We've gone over why he would deserve such a nickname, but just to end it there on Chris, I just thought everything he did in this series was conducting the team, as we said, between playmaking for others, scoring when he had to, and getting the whole fan base behind the team as well. He's kind of orchestrated everything here, obviously along with Monty Williams, who will hopefully give his due credit some point at this episode as well, Max.
Absolutely. Yeah, the last thing I'll say just real quickly is you brought up, like, everyone criticizing our lack of playoff experience. Well, it matters a lot that our leader has a ton of playoff experience.
Yes.
And our other emotional leader, Jake Crowder, does as well. Like, you don't need everyone to have it. You just need some of your key guys to have it.
The right guys.
And then also Devin Booker doesn't even need it, which helps.
Yes.
All right. Let's go to 4-star, David. This is where it becomes impossible. I think the next 3 are basically impossible to order for me. I eventually settled on an order, and I'm very interested to see if you have the same one. So I guess I'll just ask you: is your 4-star player very tall?
My 4-star player is not very tall, at least in NBA size standards. But I definitely could have gone the very tall guy here. So choose your own adventure here, Max. We can go with my 4-star or your 4-star.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I think you know who my 4-star is now. So is my 4-star at least your 3-star?
Yes. So we've just flipped again.
Okay. So let's go ahead and start with my 4-star then. I think we've given it away. It's DeAndre Ayton. Series stats: 14.3 points per game, 10.5 rebounds per game, 61% field goals, 88% free throws. Low volume, but nice to see. Perhaps my favorite number, though, for him, David, and it's really not a number series for him. And as we've pointed out in this podcast a million times, and as you have pointed out in your newsletter a million times, it's never about numbers with DeAndre Ayton, ever.
Nope.
But perhaps my favorite number of the entire series, David, illustrates this point. My favorite number was that he averaged 0.3 blocks per game while shutting down the MVP of the league in the post. I mean, if we ever talk about DeAndre Ayton's blocks again, David, please just slap us in the face.
I don't think we ever really did, and I definitely don't plan to going forward. It was used, as you say, I guess incorrectly, and numbers in general have been used incorrectly for DeAndre Ayton because, statistically not an amazing leap off the page series for DeAndre, but he very much deserves 4 stars, even though I didn't give it to him because I thought another guy very much deserved it as well. But I think that it's a good idea that you've jumped to him here because we did put him at the back of the last episode a little bit, or the previous one previewing the Lakers series. So I'm really happy to talk about him up front here. I'll throw another thing that kind of goes into your point there, and a question your way. How many personal fouls for the entire series, Max?
Ooh, that's a good question. Not a ton. I mean, I know he got in a bit of foul trouble in the last game, and I'm going to say he had like 8.
Right on the money.
Nice.
So 0.3 of a block, only 8 fouls over the entire series of 4 games, and really did a number on his direct matchup, the MVP, Nikola Jokic, while being pretty impressive on the other end too. It's funny, it's almost the opposite series for Ayton. We went into both series expecting him to have I guess a big defensive assignment, but the way that the Lakers played us offensively, he found himself, really getting and picking up big numbers on the offensive end. But the guards really dominated the offense in this series, for mine at least, and I think for most people. But I thought he still had quite a number of nice paint finishes, and probably better than the LA series. His numbers, I think, as you said, 61% in this series, where he was probably more like 80% or something in the Lakers series. But the Lakers series, it was just all dunks at the front of the rim because that's the way they were playing him. Whereas, one of my favorite things about him is becoming that kind of little bit of a bailout option, particularly for Devin Booker. Gets himself stuck in some scenarios where he's going to get his shot blocked, and right at the last minute he dumps it down to DeAndre, and most of those ones are getting finished. He was 63% on all his paint touches in this series, and had some really nifty left-hand finishes, right-hand finishes. We've always discussed, I guess, the lack of aggression with the dunks, but also tried to balance it out with talking about how elite his touch is. And I just thought the way he was able to manipulate Jokic as a ground-bound center and finish over the top of him was worth noting, before getting into, obviously, the defense match.
I'm so glad you brought up the thing where Booker's using him as kind of a bailout option, and he's making the shots at a really, really high clip, and they're not really easy shots. They're into the shot clock kind of like turnaround hooks that most players in the NBA would not make them very often. But I feel like every time DeAndre puts one of those up, I expect it to go in, which is just so huge. I mean, those are the kind of plays that can keep you in a game if your offense is stagnating or something like that. You know what I mean? One thing I do want to point out, while he wasn't very flashy in this series, I'd be remiss not to remember his dunk on Michael Porter Jr. in the first game, like in the very beginning. Feels like ancient history, but remember, that was fun. That dunk was nuts.
I missed the start of that game live, so I came to Twitter losing their mind, and even, it's a pretty rare occurrence for me, but a few people even texting and DMing me who are, not Suns Twitter people, kind of saying, did you just see that? So I was logging on kind of going, what the hell did I just miss?
Yeah, well, it's fun to see him do some of these. And, in the Lakers series, he had the one where he drove in and did the reverse layup.
Yep.
Like, it's fun to see that even though it's not a focus of his offense, he's not there yet, it's fun to see that when he's locked in, he can still do some of this stuff. You know what I mean? I think we're seeing a lot from him in terms of what he can be in the future, in addition to being able to keep and play within himself now, which is, you can't give the guy enough credit for doing both those things at once. It's really hard to do, to both know you have the potential to do these things that are going to make you a star one day potentially, but then not do them because you're trying to win the games. I don't know if you could say enough about how much he's bought into what he needs to do to win in this playoffs. I think that, maybe the guy we just talked about said it the best. Chris Paul, after I think game 2 or maybe it was game 3, called DeAndre Ayton the MVP of the playoffs, I think, so far for the Suns. Part of that maybe just saying that because he wants DeAndre to keep playing this way, but part of it also is because he has been.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. As much as the CP3 that we saw in this series is basically non-replaceable, and the Booker who had 40 plus in a closeout game against the Lakers, probably can't be replaced by someone else on this team either. But in terms of what DeAndre Ayton brings to the team night in, night out throughout the playoffs, and frankly night in, night out through the whole season to this date, he's just so unselfish, and they don't have anyone that can replace that. So I tend to agree with Chris Paul if you're looking at that kind of most valuable player on this team throughout the playoffs so far. He's got to be up there, and we'll get to a leaderboard at the end of this 5 stars here, but hint, he is going to be up there with how he's voted so far through the first 2 series. Maybe 2 stats that kind of bear this out the best, and 2 things that he did in this series compared to, I guess, what he's been doing all season long. Screen assists, I know they're a bit of a topic of conversation, but he had 6 screen assists for 12 points in this series, and his season average was 5.6 for 11.9 points. So consistency to a T. Like, he was basically exactly who he's been all season when it came to this, and no one else can do that for this team. You look at the screen assist numbers, yes, they run all the offense through him in a way with all those handoffs and things, but even if they tried to make that someone else, they're definitely not picking up the numbers that he has. And this one's even better for me. Contested shots, 17.3 a game in this series. That's 13.8 twos and also 3.5 threes he's contesting from the other team. That is way up from his season averages of just 13.2 per game. So almost 4 more shots, more than 4 more shots per game in this one, particularly because of the guy that he was guarding directly. But he just contests so many shots from all 5 guys on the floor. And again, that's another stat. If you go and look at the total numbers, he's like, every game he'll be 8, 9, 10 shots above the next guy from the Suns in contested shots. And I guess that's why we focused on his defense for so long early on in his Suns career, Max, because we said it so many times. You can be, a bad defender at shooting guard like Devin Booker was early in his career, and it doesn't have as harmful effect on the team. Yes, you can be targeted in the playoffs, etc., but you can't be a bad defender at that position, and he's far from that now, Max.
I mean, I think if you're making an all-defensive team in the playoffs, I think he's got to be on it. First team. I mean, he played against Anthony Davis. To be fair, was out after a little bit, but in game 1 shut him down. I think he just did a number on the MVP, and that's probably where we should at least touch on. I don't know if you have anything else, but we should probably touch on just. And we have sort of ancillarily, but we need to talk about just what happened with him and Jokic.
Yep.
And I think a couple of things happened. One, Jokic relies a lot on his craft and his pump fakes and his getting people out of position and all that kind of thing.
Yep.
It just doesn't work with DeAndre Ayton because he doesn't care. He's just going to play solid defense and be gigantic.
Yep.
You don't have to do very much if you're DeAndre Ayton. You move like a gazelle and you have very long arms. And Ayton knows that now. And honestly, his passiveness is working to his advantage as a defender in the playoffs so far. And the other thing that I think we have to point out is Ayton wore Jokic out in this series in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Jokic had a huge task in front of him, and listen, I give him credit for that. Not very many players in the world could do what he was doing, but having to chase DeAndre Ayton around, the gazelle that is DeAndre Ayton, it's not easy, especially when it gets later in games. I think you saw that. I think you saw Jokic wear out in the third and fourth quarters of games in this series. And a lot of that goes to the fact that DeAndre Ayton's running. You can't just jog back on defense when you're DeAndre Ayton's your matchup. And I think it's so amazing what shape he's in. Especially because, he wasn't playing particularly well at the very end of the season. He had a good stretch.
Yep.
At the very end, he wasn't playing very well, and then he got hurt.
Yep.
And so there was legitimate questions is he going to be in shape? And I think the answer is he's in the best shape I've ever seen him as a Sun.
He's definitely in the best shape he's ever been in, and that is just a pleasure to see as someone who was earlier on commented on the cardio side of things opening up so much more of his game if he gets there. And then I think we've just seen in the playoffs he's willing to what I call gut run a little bit more. So, in the regular season, hits a wall, can't get that second wind or can't have or get the motive or find the motivation to get that second wind. When you're in the playoffs, he's clearly a big game player. We're seeing that. He's a 16 win type player in this league. And then throw on top of that you're guarding the MVP, and in the series before that, you guarded, a top 5 player in the NBA when healthy and a champion from last year. He just can't drop his head because he knows that the team's going to be all over him. You mentioned CP3 earlier and the things that he says about DeAndre. I think he's been the architect in terms of knowing when to pull the right levers on DeAndre, and they've just got him fully locked in right now. And as you said, beating Jokic down the court, another unselfish trait, because you don't always get the ball. I've always tried to highlight where I can rewatching games that him running down the lane sucks in 2 or 3 guys because Jokic hasn't kept up with him, so they have to get in front of him instead, or else it's going to be a breakaway dunk. And then that's when your shooters open up in the corners, where the Suns absolutely killed the Nuggets in this series. And then thankfully they also found a way to get, feed him the ball at least a couple of times in those situations, so he does get the reward that isn't just somebody else getting a bucket, Max.
Yeah, I mean, and the amazing thing too is we talk about Chris Paul and his relationship. There was a time during this season where it looked like Chris Paul and Devin Booker were fed up with Ayton all the time.
Yep.
And just the fact that he's been able to make this much progress in this short amount of time, it's really remarkable. I mean, David is not David, Ayton. That's how much I respect Ayton right now, is that I'm mistaking your name with Ayton. He is exceeding any of the wild expectations we ever could have had for him in this playoffs. He is so far above where I would have thought A+ was for him that it's hard for me even to put into words how impressed I am by him. It's just, like you said, I think I had him. I think we both had him 4 stars last series, and he's going to be. I had a 4-star here. I think you have a 3-star here. Like you said, he's going to be maybe number 1 in the playoffs, or at least very close to that. And that just goes to show what happened with him. If we had been doing this 5-star thing all season long, there have been weeks where he was not in the top 5 for sure.
I agree.
There have been weeks where he was in close.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is this consistently at the very top of that, it just goes to show you what a leap he has made and how exciting this all is.
Yeah, I think he's had, I don't want people to take this negatively. I think he's had a good run, a dream run in terms of matchups. I know that sounds crazy when you're talking about him guarding Anthony Davis and then the MVP in the second round, but just really suited his current strengths and what he's really good at. What's going to be really interesting is whether we get in the second part of this episode to talking about the Clippers or Utah, because if it's Utah, I think the dream run continues and it becomes really more of the same for DeAndre Ayton. If it's the Clippers, it gets a little bit more interesting, and I'm tipping in that preview episode we'll have a whole section on what might happen there. All I would say is, if it's the Clippers and then potentially someone like the Clippers in the finals, if we get that far, and he still exceeds what I think of him, then that's when I'm going to be like, fainting at the thought of what this guy could potentially become, because, not to discredit what he's done, but everything he's doing now, he's showed flashes of, just hasn't done it consistently, and that's why I'm so impressed with the consistency of what he's doing, but not shocked at the same time, because I always believed that he had this in him. But boy, is it amazing to see night in, night out from this guy. It's just, the big guys don't get any smaller as the games go on, and he's really starting to realize that now and put his imprint on these playoff games, Max.
Yeah, no, and you saw a little bit of what you're referring to in the fourth quarter of Game 4 after Jokic had been ejected. And the Nuggets, they had to go small. They had no other options.
Yeah.
And it was a little, Ayton kind of had a hard time finding his place. And to be fair to him, that was totally out of nowhere. They didn't expect it. They didn't game plan for it. So it'll be a whole different thing when they can plan for it. But
exactly.
I think, Suns fans who don't exactly know what you're talking about, I think that's, put that in your mind, as an example of what could go wrong in terms of just not having a place. Because like you said, he's been able to focus on Davis and Jokic. And even with Davis now on Drummond, on big guy, and Gasol.
Yeah.
But there is a series in our future, whether it's the Clippers or maybe the Brooklyn Nets, where there's not going to be a guy like that. So Ayton's going to have to find a way to succeed regardless. And like you said, if he does, that will be really exciting. But all right, well, how about we go on to our 3-star, David? And I don't even know if we have if I have your 4-star, my 3-star. I don't even know if we have the same guy here because I think it's really close. I want to hear you go ahead and say, who is your 4-star player?
My 4-star player is Devin Booker, Max.
Okay, that is my 3-star. I'll let you lead with him.
He had 25.3 points per game, shot 49, 31, 88 from the three respective percentages there. He had a team second high 7.8 rebounds per game in this one, 4.5 assists, 3.5 turnovers, and got to the line 6 times again in this series. They didn't have a matchup for him as we expected, Max, and he basically got to do whatever he wanted. He led the team in shots, he led the team in threes, and he led the team in free throw attempts. He's a real triple threat, and I was really impressed with what he did in this series, so much so that I gave him the 4 stars, Max.
Yeah, and I was very close to doing that myself. I mean, part of it for me was he wasn't really tested that much in this series.
No.
But I do want to focus on that rebounding number because I think that's really interesting. 8 rebounds a game is no joke. That's a lot of rebounds. And part of it, I think, is because guys are boxing out better now.
Yep.
Shout out Chris Baker, who, is sad when the season box out. But they are now. And I think that it really helps when Booker gets the rebound as compared to Ayton or whoever else because he can get out on the run, right? And I think this stat showed it. He led the team in fast break points per game by a significant margin in this series. And he did it in the last series. And I think the 8 rebounds per game are a big part of that. When he's able to get the ball and go, I mean, that's obviously more devastating than a lot of guys getting the rebound and going, right? So I think that rebound number really matters. It also shows how much he's hustling.
Yep.
I think that he had the big numbers. He had the big 11 in Game 6 of the Lakers series. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's been playing really good defense this entire time, in my opinion. The whole playoff so far. And when he is doing everything else in addition to what he can do offensively, it turns him into a different level of player, and it makes us, together with CP3, the best backcourt in the playoffs right now, bar none, not close.
Yeah, and I think your point on the rebounding is definitely one that we needed to lead with here. The team as a whole, gang rebounding with DeAndre Ayton has been really impressive to see, but on your point, I wouldn't be shocked if it is some sort of a team rule here, because if Ayton gets the rebound, he will always look for the point guard on the floor. I've even seen him look off Devin Booker a couple of times, knowing that Chris Paul's on the floor, and it's almost like he knows that he's going to get in trouble if he doesn't outlet it to Chris Paul to start the break. So it almost feels like a team rule of Devin, we're not against you bringing the ball up, but it can only be when you go and get the rebound and go straight away. Whereas if it's somebody else, we'd rather one of our point guards, whether it's Paul or Payne, we don't feel that they're as effective getting down the court earlier and sitting in the corner. We'd rather you be that guy when they're on the floor. So, I wonder if the mindset shift there is just oh shit, the only way I'm going to be able to, get out in transition is if I go and get the ball myself. I better go get myself 8 rebounds a game, Max.
Yeah, I absolutely can see that happening. I mean, I think the whole thing is, we talk a lot about how Ayton's gotten better than playoffs, and deservedly so because he's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
But I think we may be actually underrating how much better Booker has gotten in the playoffs so far, kind of on every level besides scoring, which he's always good at. He's always been good at. He's just so much better right now as a hustle player, as a rebounder, as a defender. all the quote unquote little things that Booker has never been that good at, he's been excellent at in the entire playoffs. And something I'll add to that is keeping his composure.
Yep.
Because we talked about this in the last time. He's not known for it, but he continues to just never be rattled at any point in the games. And a lot of what he's been doing in this series, like he averaged 25.3. It's not gaudy numbers, about where he averaged, but a lot of it was timely. In game one, he hit that huge three where it ended up on the ground, and when we were coming back.
Yep.
He made some crazy shots on the road on games 3 and 4. I remember particularly towards the end of the second quarter, going into halftime of the fourth of game 4, he was really carrying our offense in a lot of ways. And I think that he's picking his spots in a way that we haven't seen him do necessarily much of his career. He knows when to score, knows when to defer, and I think just seeing the all-around Devin Booker come to fruition has been really, really fun in these playoffs.
Yeah, he lost his head a little bit early on in that Lakers series with shoving Schroeder, and I wasn't very happy about that. But I'm kind of glad that it did happen in a way, and back at the very start, because it's very clear that game in particular is where the Suns re-locked in and have essentially won 7 games since, I believe, since that game and everything getting out of hand. I'll throw another thing at you here. We said that it was going to feel like a huge downgrade for Devin Booker going from playing against that Lakers defense to this Denver one where they really had no one to guard him. He was 19 of 24 in the paint in this series, Max.
That definitely demonstrates that, doesn't it? I do have to defend Booker a little bit there on the Schroeder shove. He did get punched in the nuts by Schroeder.
He did.
I'd be mad about that too. So I get it. But you're right though. I mean, listen, in these next 2 rounds, I don't care if you get punched in the nuts. You can't react like that, especially if it's a competitive game and that matters. Like you have to keep your cool. And I think that the more the playoffs go on, the more and more faith I'm going to have in him in doing that. And I'll tell you what, if Chris Paul misses games in this series upcoming, which is probably likely to miss at least one, it's going to be so freaking important for Devin Booker to be the level-headed leader that Chris Paul would be if he were there. We just gotta hope that he can do that because they're gonna rely on it.
Yep, and I think that was the moment where Chris Paul, not to harp on his influence too much, but we kind of have to because he's got his fingerprints all over this team. That's probably where he pulled them back in and said, we've got to lock back in here. The whole playoffs as a whole. In ISO possessions, 97th percentile right now, Devin Booker, and that's going to be really fucking important as we go through these next couple of series. ISO is going to be way more important, but he can do it all because he's also 93rd percentile in spot ups so far in the playoffs, Max. So he's kind of got that dual role playing with CP3 down to an art now with 1 season in the bank. And he's just having fun. We're seeing Devin Booker finish left-hand floaters in the lane in the playoffs, Max. This guy is just having fun. He's finally there. He can't help but, have fun while he's doing it. And we're picking up the wins in the process. I mean, not to end on a negative here, but the only question I was going to throw at you going into these later rounds, should we be concerned about the turnovers at all? It's another series where he's had, almost a 1-to-1 ratio here and does seem to still be getting a little bit flustered or making silly mistakes at certain times. And then I guess throwing in what you just mentioned, if Chris Paul's going to be out a couple of games, it becomes even more important, Max.
It's a great question, and it's a very fair question to ask. I think my answer is going to be I'm not worried yet because I think a lot of those turnovers have been in feel-out situations and not in critical end-of-game situations. I think, not that that's one thing. We haven't had a lot of close games in this entire playoffs at all. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But he hasn't been turning over the ball when it matters, in my opinion. It's been almost all in the first half of a lot of these games. So I'll worry about it more when it doesn't feel like that's what's happening. But what you're saying though, I think is more important. The ISO scoring. I love your point about how important that'll be going forward. I mean, imagine we play against the Nets in the finals. It's going to be incredibly important for Booker and Paul to match what the other guys are doing. So I completely agree with that. And I don't know. I mean, listen, I think that my guess is that we're going to be more impressed by Booker in this next series. But I think fans might be underrating how good he was in this series overall. He was, in my opinion, at times spectacular. It just didn't get tested that much.
Yep, and that's why I gave him 4 stars. But let's move to 2 and see if we match up on this one, Max.
I think we will, although it won't totally shock me if my 1 star is your 2 star because my 1 star was freaking great too. But my 2-star is Mikal Bridges, David.
He is also my 2-star, so we're back on track here, Max. Do you want to go through his stats?
I kind of can't believe we're giving him 2 stars. But Jesus, but yes. So 16 points per game, 3.8 rebounds per game, 1.5 steals, 0.8 blocks. He had 54% shooting from the field, 33% from 3. Actually, kind of surprised me he was that low. And then 85% from the line on 3.3 attempts. I don't think those numbers really capture well enough what his impact was. The one thing I want to focus on, because I think it was just a key point in this series, was the third quarter of Game 1 when he really just kind of came out of nowhere and saved us with his offense.
Yeah,
he ended up being the lead scorer for the team in the game. I think, and that's Chris Paul passive at the end there, but that third quarter was maybe the most important stretch any player had in this entire series. What he did there, so I want to make sure that gets called out, because hell, if that doesn't happen, we might lose Game 1. I mean, we probably still win the series. We're clearly better than them, but maybe Chris Paul ends up getting this COVID thing before Game 5, and who the hell knows, right?
Very true, very true. It does seem lucky right now that we swept the Nuggets, and Mikal was a big part of that. Your memory did serve you correctly. I led right off the top there of the recap. He had 23-5 in Game 1 and was the first one mentioned. And maybe a stat that does show his influence on this series, Max. He was a team high plus 18 for the series amongst everyone of the Phoenix Suns. So that definitely shows him his credit. I'm really happy for him after, I put it here, quote unquote, rough first series, because I think we're going to look back on that first series in hindsight and feel like Mikal was super underrated in what he did to get him through that Lakers series. But, he was Michael Porter Jr.'s primary defender for most of the time. As you said, he had 1.5 steals, 0.8 blocks, throw in a team high 2 deflections per game as well. And he was his, disruptive best. And he attacked closeouts on offense, which was really his job. He maybe, I guess, if you wanted to nitpick, that was one thing that he didn't seem as confident doing against the likes of LeBron James in the first series, and fans were a little bit upset about that. 6 points per game on closeouts. I'll throw it as a question. I wasn't going to. What do you reckon his efficiency was on drives in this series, Max?
So by efficiency, are you talking field goal percentage or true shooting or what?
Yeah.
Field goal? Probably pretty high. He was awesome. I think maybe like 60.
Try 88.9%.
Whoa! Are you serious?
I am serious. And that's not, that's 6 points per game. So he scored 24 points in this series on drives at an 89% clip.
That's crazy. And that's part of why we're blowing them out. These crazy efficiency things.
Yep.
I think that I'm so glad you brought that up. That's so important. And the other thing I'm glad you brought up was the last series, because like you said, we're probably going to look back, and I know exactly what we're going to say. Oh, maybe he was guarding arguably the GOAT or the second GOAT in that series. Maybe that's what happened, because he totally showed that he's the same offensive player from the regular season in the playoffs. The one thing you want us to get better is the 3-point shooting, which actually was better in the Lakers series, oddly.
Yeah.
But, I mean, early in the series, I think the first 2 games it was very good. The first game, it definitely was. And you mentioned the MPJ thing. I don't want to overlook that, because it was really important. And remember, our preview podcast here, a large part of why I switched my pick from Suns in 6 to Suns in 5 is when you brought up to me that Mikal would probably have that matchup.
Yeah.
And it really just came out to fruition, didn't it? It was exactly what we expected. I mean, to be fair, MPJ had a little bit of an injury thing going on.
Yep.
But Mikal was definitely a good matchup on him. And even in the first game before, I think he suffered whatever he suffered. I think Mikal was really getting in on him on his shots. I think that was it was a nice matchup for us.
Yeah, they're just on a string defensively at the moment. The rotations are just a real treat to watch. I tried to highlight it in one of my plays of the game during this series. And then, 0.5 on the other end, and Mikal's a big part of that. I know it's not a groundbreaking observation or question here, but, I think I've made it clear in the past that I think even though Ryan McDonough was still around, that Jones kind of made the Mikal trade. That just on things that I know and my general feel of that front office, I feel like that was more of a Jones pick. And it's just so obvious to me now how much of a premium they put on B-ball IQ watching this team in the playoffs, because defensively, none of them are great athletes, but they're just in the right spots all the time, and then that ball is just pinging around offensively as well. And Mikhail is just kind of the head of that, and really the guy that I look to as being that guy who's not flashy on either end, but is just doing the right thing every single time. And we touched on it last episode. He had 3.3 free throw attempts in this series, which is around that mark that we were kind of saying we'd love to see him get to, because he's only more at like 1.8 in the regular season. So you add that with his efficiency on drives, and an attacking Mikhail just opens up so much for this Suns offense, Max.
Yeah, worth mentioning too, not only efficiency on drives, but efficiency on free throw shooting. He's a great free throw shooter, 85% in this series. That's right in line with where he's at. It helps, man. It helps in general that the team's good from the free throw line. That is definitely something that will maybe it didn't matter so much so far in this series because we haven't had a lot of close games. In this playoffs. But I promise you, it won't be this easy going forward. And being able to shoot free throws, particularly at the end of the games, will be important. Just ask Sixers fans how important shooting free throws at the end of the games is.
Yes.
All right, let's go to 1 star. We're going a little long as we knew we would.
Always.
I'd be shocked if you don't have Jay Crowder here, David.
I have Jay Crowder here, Max.
I also love how the starting lineup was our 5 stars. I knew it would be, but the fact our starting lineup is playing this well right now, it's just great. But let me get into Jay Crowder. 12 points a game, 5.8 rebounds, 1.3 blocks. Most important thing about him, besides his defense, which we'll get to, in my opinion, was his shooting splits. 52% from the field, 55% from 3 on 5.5 attempts. He made 12 of 22 3-point shots, ended up with a 73.3% true shooting. David, he was a flamethrower.
He was a flamethrower. He got his shooting back in this series. Interesting, though, I have noted it a couple of times, he's still 54% on 2.6 3-point attempts from wide open over both the series. So that hasn't left him, but he got way more open looks in general in this series, and that's what gets him going. If he can get a couple of those wide open ones to fall early, then he starts to make some of the harder ones too, and he was just unconscious in this one. 1.5 attempts with a tight defender, and he shot 50% on those. 1.3 attempts with an open look, and he shot 60% on those, and 2.8 wide open, and he shot 54% on those in this series. I can't say enough about Jay Crowder and the shooting being back and being happy for that. I also can't say enough about his quarter 1 in that last game 4 and the way he started. And I just can't help but think about the signing, Max. I'll throw to you now before we get into any other Jay Crowder thoughts. I'm going to throw you the other mid-level exception guys that got signed this offseason, all right?
I'm ready.
Tristan Thompson, Garrett Temple, Jermichael Green, Serge Ibaka, Montrezl Harrell, a combination of Bradley and Harkless for the Heat, combination of Augustine and Forbes for the Bucks, Derek Jones Jr., Aaron Baines, Derek Favors, and Robin Lopez. I don't think it is a fair fight. Jay Crowder is easily the best signing that the Suns could have made with the mid-level exception this offseason.
Most of those were kind of terrible, even.
Yep.
Some of them were, like, okay, I guess, but, like, none of them were even, like, you'd say, like, wow, that was a good signing, like, really good. Like, the only one was Jay Crowder, and it was an excellent signing. And I love that. That was great. I'm going to resist the impulse to make fun of you for the whole DJ Augustin thing. To be fair to you, it was Moses on Twitter that was freaking out over that.
Yeah.
I had some weird irrational faith in Cameron Payne that somehow worked out. I'm not taking credit for that. That was weird. I don't know why. One of those things that worked out. But back to Jay Crowder.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought up the first quarter of Game 4. He was ridiculous. He was all over the place defensively in that quarter. I think of his 4 blocks, you said he had 2 or 3 had to have been in the first quarter. He was everywhere.
And my favorite thing, actually, probably from this series, rewatching the games in that first quarter. I can't remember who it was. One of Michael Porter Jr. or Jokic went down the court, and he did like the famous "give me that shit" as he blocked the ball. And then the next possession down, he did it again, and he said, "Give me that shit again."
I didn't see that. He really said again.
He really said again, or two, or something. Like, it wasn't just give me that shit. Like, he added the fact that he'd just done it 30 seconds earlier and was, really rubbing salt into the wound. So that was a highlight from this series for me. But yeah, to get into the more serious side, just the way that he started that was like, we're finishing the job right here, right now. I'm not mucking around and going back to Phoenix to finish this one in 5. And he just had he just stamped all over it. And then when he gets rolling, then you see him pump fake, step back 3, knock it down, all those other things of his game kind of starts to come in. But he starts it with defense every single time and hitting those wide open shots, and that's really all we can ask him to do.
I love the way you just put that, because you're so right. Like, when Jay Crowder came out and did that defensively in the first quarter, that's when I was like, oh, so we're going to sweep then. Okay. I lost all my concern for the game. I've been extremely nervous for every single playoff game in this series. I got a little less nervous for Game 3, and I was a little nervous for Game 4 until that Jay Crowder thing happened. My nerves left me entirely. I was like, okay, well, we're definitely winning this game.
And again, we said you don't need leadership on every line or at every position. You just need it in the right spots. And for all the praising we did up top of Chris Paul, it's kind of poetic that we're going to bookend it here with the other guy, as you coined him, the spiritual leader of this team, because they just needed someone to set the tone in that game and go, because Denver were always going to throw their best punch. They changed the starting lineup, albeit too late. They were going to come out and not want to get swept here and have their pants pulled down. But Crowder was like, nah, I'm done. I've had enough. And he led from the front. And that leadership, again, from that position was, the best signing, as we said, that they possibly could have made with that money.
Well, and also, I think I'm remembering this correctly. In Game 3, wasn't he really damn good from 3 in the first quarter, or at least the first half? I think he was making a lot of threes in the first half of Game 3. So, I think in both of our closeout games, he just came in with a veteran's kind of savvy. We're not going back to Phoenix here. There's no reason for us to go back to Phoenix against this team. They're inferior to us. A lot of teams, even if the team's that inferior to them, we just let them hang around in one game because they just don't have that mindset. But the fact that Jay Crowder brought that mindset into this series, I think, was the reason we swept. And also just shows you how insane this team has been, that he's the one star, David.
Yep. And, we touched on it on either space. I think it might have been the Spaces, or... No, it can't have been the Spaces because it was before Game 4. Maybe I did it on the podcast with the timeline guys. Mm-hmm. Book was the first guy in when Campaign got hit by Jokic, but the second guy, and particularly to make sure that Book was going to be okay, was Jay Crowder, Max.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you expect Jay Crowder to be the first guy. It was impressive that Book was the first guy.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was there is not surprising. He will be there always. Although he needs to be a little careful, David, because he has 4 techs already.
Yes, and that is something to
7
watch.
Is when you get a suspension, right?
It is 7, so that's definitely something to watch. We don't want him to be towing or balancing on that fine line, because we need him, particularly with Chris potentially being out.
That might be one reason to root for the Jazz, because I think there's no way Crowder's escaping the Clippers series without at least 2 technicals.
That's very true. Very, very true.
All right, David, how about we go to Did You Know before we finish this up?
How about a leaderboard first, Max? We've got to wrap things up after 2 whole series here. What do you reckon?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Booker, top of the charts, 17 he leads our 5-star leaderboard with so far. Small surprise here, but definitely well-deserved. DeAndre Ayton is second with 15, just 2 votes behind Booker. That would be incredible if we get to another one of these pods and he is out on top. Chris Paul, 12 votes in 3rd place. Jay Crowder, 7 votes in 4th place. We have Campaign, who wasn't mentioned this time around. We'll talk about him in a second, but had 5 votes from the first series, so he is in 5th place. And Mikal Bridges rounds it out with Suns players who have had 5 votes so far. So we've got a tight leaderboard, and I hope, we've said it a few times, I hope we're coming back to update it again, and there's some more changes to that one, Max.
One other thing I want to point out related to this, in our last podcast, David, I think we had both... Not our last podcast. I think it was I don't remember which podcast it was. We both were like, hey, I really hope Chris Paul is the 5-star player next time.
Don't you love that?
And David, he was the 5-star player this time.
Yeah. And, as I said, I hope Ayton is, because that's going to go a long way to us coming together to review a series win. But how about I throw to Did You Know for you now, Max?
Let's do it.
So, Max, after the craziness this week and witnessing the series Chris Paul just had, and with the news this week that he made second team All-NBA, it only seemed fair to dedicate Did You Know to CP3 this episode. Did you know, Max, that this was Chris Paul's 10th All-NBA nod out of 16 seasons in the NBA? Pretty remarkable. Paul has 4 first-team appearances, 1 third-team appearance, and now 5 total second-team appearances on his resume. But let's take a look at some of his backcourt partners in those teams through a series of first quiz questions for the segment, Max. First up,
Oh, God.
which All-NBA guard did Chris Paul get named with in 3 out of his 4 first-team selections in 08, 12, and 13, Max?
Kobe?
Kobe, 1 for 1.
Yeah.
Next, which future teammate, there's your clue, was named with Chris Paul in his other first-team selection in 2014, Max?
Is that Harden?
Harden, 2 for 2. This is a good one. Which guard has been named with Paul in the last 3 All-NBA selections, all of which both of them were on the second team, Max? The years are 2016, 2020, and this year, which is a big clue.
Oh, man, I forgot which one was this year. Oh, was it? No, because that was Lillard?
Lillard, 3 for 3. You are on a roll, and that leaves just 3 more selections, Max.
Okay.
2 second teams in 09 and 15, and 1 third team in 2011. And I'm not going to make you guess those unless you have any inklings and want to take a stab.
Nah, I'm going to let you do it.
There's a few tricky names in this one, so I won't put it to you. Brandon Roy in 2009, Manu Ginobili in 2011,
Wow.
and Russell Westbrook in 2015. A quick break from the test questions though, Max, but just a warning, don't switch off completely just yet. With CP3 getting his 10th All-NBA nod, he now joins an illustrious group of just 24 NBA players to reach that feat. Headed up by LeBron James with 17, the group also includes 2 former Suns in Shaquille O'Neal, who has 14, and Charles Barkley, who has 11. Interestingly, though, Max, it places CP3 in a much smaller group of now just 6 point guards with 10 plus appearances on the All-NBA list, with CP3 joining Magic, who has 10, Stockton with 11, Oscar Robinson 11, Jerry West with 12, and Bob Cousy with 12 as well. It's pretty incredible how his overall CV is shaping up, Max, and it doesn't even end there. Here comes the final round of tests while we look over the rest of CP3's illustrious NBA accolades. All-NBA first team. We already touched on Paul's 4 first team appearances, I should say, but Max, who was the last Sun to get an All-NBA first team nod? It's a trick question of sorts. You've got a couple to choose from here.
That's interesting. I mean, I was going to guess either Stoudemire or Nash.
It is both of them in 06, 07. All-NBA second team, the most joined team for Paul's career, and the same pair is the answer for the Suns here, Amari and Nash. So instead, Max, can you tell me what year it was that the two of them got named together to the All-NBA second team?
Did they both? I don't think maybe it was 2010?
It was 09-010.
Okay.
Good stuff. You are 5 from 5, I think. This is amazing.
There you go.
All-NBA third team, just 1 third team for Paul, Max. But who was the last Suns third team? And a small clue, the most recent Sun to make All-NBA in general.
Did Dragic make it in this crazy run?
6 for 6 in 2013, 2014. You are on the money.
Nice.
MVP first votes. Paul got 2 this year, which adds to his total where he's had 4 seasons of picking up first place votes in the MVP running. Who was the last Sun to get MVP first place votes? Pretty easy one.
Yeah, it's got to be Nash, right?
Yep. 2007, he was second to Dirk. All-D first team, all defensive first team, that is. 7 times Chris Paul has made the first team all defense. Max, who was the last Sun to make the first team all defense?
The first team all defense. Did Raja Bell make it that one year?
Raja Bell made it in 2007. You are 7 from 7, Max. All D second team. Just keep that name in the back of your mind. I want to keep you on a run here. Another 2 times CP3 made the second team, and while McCall just missed out this year, who was the last Phoenix Suns player to actually make the second team, Max?
Oh, no. Grant Hill?
It's the same name.
Oh, it's the same name? Oh, because you say keep the name. Well, I think I didn't get it.
Raja Bell the year after in 2008. And Rookie of the Year, a nice easy one to finish to go, I think 9 from 10 or 8 from 9 here, Max. Paul was Rookie of the Year all the way back in the beginning in 2006. And the last Suns Rookie of the Year was...
Mari Stoudemire?
In 2003. Now let me round it out. Did you know, with a little deep dive I did on Chris Paul and another point guard of the Phoenix Suns history books, I went a little deep earlier this week, and look what I found, Max. Steve Nash, age 35, versus Chris Paul, age 35. Nash missed just 1 game in the regular season that year, with Paul missing just 1 game plus the game that he rested at the end of this season. Per 36, Paul averaged 18.8 points per game to Nash's 18. Nash shot 50.7% from the field compared to Paul's 49.9, pretty close. They both took exactly 3 free throw attempts a game and both shot 93% each from the charity stripe. Finally, despite a slight difference in assists, 12.1 to Nash to Paul's 10.2 per 36, they had nearly identical usage rates at 22%, and their 3-point attempt rate was also 29.5. Nash also finished with 9.9 win shares to Paul's 9.2, all pretty close at age 35. But Max, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's head to the playoffs. Nash played 16 games in that 09-10 playoff run, with the Suns ultimately falling short in the round the current Suns are about to embark on, the Western Conference Finals. In comparison, Paul has played 10 games so far, and again their stats are near identical on a per 36 basis. 19 points to 18.1, 10.8 assists to 10, 51% from the field on roughly 13 shots, all identical. Nash shades Paul on all those stats currently, but with Paul covering him easily in one key area, just 1.6 turnovers to Nash's 4 per 36. With the one thing that Paul hasn't achieved to date also being the one thing that eluded Steve Nash, he is hoping he and the current Suns can go one step further and make it to the NBA Finals. I, for one, hope we have a healthy Chris Paul back soon for that push, Max, but for now, maybe we can talk some more about what he and the Suns did to the Nuggets in the last round.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that gives me a lot of confidence if Nash and Paul were playing equal so far, because Paul has not been healthy for a lot of that. So
it's pretty amazing.
It's crazy. So, I mean, we'll see. If he keeps playing the way he's playing in Denver, he will have, I feel good about our chances. All right, we're going to do some honorable mentions. Guys we didn't get to that we want to mention from the first segment. We'll rapid fire these, I guess. David, do you want to just kind of like maybe trade off? I'll do one, you do one?
Yeah, it was pretty tough to rank the top 5, I suppose, but there's, it's pretty easy to list these guys out that had any bearing on the series. I'll start with Dario, because it was nice to see him back, Max. 6.3 points per game, 47, 50, 100, 2.8 rebounds, 1.3 assists. Just good to see him back. He looks so much better. He's got a real different feel with CP3 and kind of brings a different dynamic. Played around 12 minutes per game in this series. Next series, all things being considered, Max, what, over under next series at that 12, I feel like that's pretty much the healthy mark for Dario.
I think it depends a bit on who we play against, but yes, I do think he'll be around there. And I think that was about 100 minutes for him. And so I want to go into some of the per minute stuff actually real quick.
Go for it.
And then I'll throw it back to you. So if you go per 36 for points, he was third only behind Paul and Booker. For rebounds, he was third only behind Ayton and Craig, who we'll get to. And then in assists, he was fourth only behind Paul, Payne, and Booker. He had no turnovers in the entire series.
Wow.
And at least in my opinion, I thought he had a really nice effort against Jokic in the few times he had to be matched up against him.
I think that's a really key observation from you, not something I had down. The fact that Monty at times trusted him and didn't match Ayton directly with Jokic's minutes was a real key sign, I guess, in the confidence that the team had in Dario, which was really great to see.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty easily the 6th best player, and I would have had him, probably a 4-star in a normal segment.
Yeah,
it's just so many good players in front of him. But the fact that we got that from him, because remember going into Game 1, we didn't know if he was going to be able to play in the playoffs.
Nope.
He was awful in the Lakers series and the whole second half of the season. The fact that he just had this series is so encouraging going forward.
Yep. I love it. you go next. You alluded to one there. We'd probably go with him.
Yeah, I think the only other guy I think we have to mention, and we'll see if you have an argument for somebody else. I think Torrey Craig has to be mentioned.
Definitely.
Again, I go per 36 for him because he didn't play a ton, but per 36, 17.3 points, fifth, and also actually ahead of Ayton, Payne, and Crowder. 10.3 rebounds, behind only Ayton's 11.4. 1.9 blocks, easily number one. He shot 50% from three on 6.4 attempts for 36.
Yep.
And had maybe the moment of the series with that alley-oop finish, David. So, what a fantastic series for him.
They definitely rode like a bit of an X-team bump from Torrey, and then, he earned more minutes out of Monty, I think. And, we've touched on it before. We really need his athleticism at times, and you can kind of just show when he flashes from the weak side corner for dunks, when that's the corner that opens up. There's not many guys that can actually do that on this team, and while he's hitting, a fair share of his clip from three as well, he becomes unbenchable, yes. I suppose. And I really only had two other guys to very, very briefly touch on here. One of them was Cam Johnson, and Torrey's stealing his minutes right now, basically. That's kind of the way it plays out.
I was just going to get into that, David. I was going to ask you, do you think there's a chance going forward, or actually, there's definitely a chance. What do you think the chances are that against like a team like the Clippers maybe, or maybe like the Bucks, that Torrey Craig just completely displaces Cam Johnson in the rotation?
I'm not sure if he'll completely displace him. I think in this series he played 14 minutes per game to Cam's 17, so pretty even. I could definitely see him getting more minutes to Cam Johnson if his three continues to drop and Cam's not bringing much other than his three dropping. I will note Cam still hit some pretty big threes in this series, even though he only had 4.8 points per game. But yeah, I think particularly if we're looking ahead to like a Clippers series, I think we're going to need them both. And Torrey might play a lot of, small ball five and things like that. But him at least chipping into Cam Johnson's minutes, which is the opposite of what we thought might happen when we previewed it last time and kind of teased that we might see an even better Cam Johnson in the Denver series. I don't think we can discount him stealing minutes, that's for sure.
Yeah, my thought was more of a situation where Cam Johnson just kind of can't play in the series, kind of folds. I think he's really done well to be resilient against that. In first series, he was just good. He was underrated. But I think if anybody on the team, he'd be the guy that most likely would just kind of get, deer in headlights a little bit.
Yeah.
But I just thought about the Milwaukee thing. Like, could you imagine if we actually are in the finals against Milwaukee, who just beat the Nets, by the way? Could you imagine not having the takes if Torrey Craig's awesome in the series about how the Bucks gave it away to us?
Yes, but we've already had Denver, and then we get the Bucks as well. That would be just the ultimate Torrey Craig.
And in the finals, and it just happened.
Revenge tour would be great. Cam Payne was the only other one that I was going to throw in. Yes. Not his series, unfortunately, in this one, but we're certainly going to need him. Particularly if Chris Paul misses any time. So hopefully he can bounce back. But not much more to say on the honourable mention side there. To keep it Phoenix related, maybe we should just quickly give Monty his credit. I know I'll throw it to you because I know you noted that timeouts and stuff haven't been something that you've loved in the past, but that you've changed your opinion at least recently on that, Max.
I think it's gotten a lot better in the last few games. I think he was feeling the game a little bit better. I mean, part of it also helped that we were just better than them all the time, so that definitely was better. But there were a couple times where they started to go on like mini runs, and he would call the timeouts that I thought needed to be called.
Yeah.
And I give him credit for that. I hope that continues. So that was really my only criticism of him. Everything else about him has been literally perfect. We should talk about the moment between him and Chris Paul after the series. Unbelievable what he talked about with Chris Paul's influence on his life. Monty's just, you couldn't ask for a better leader than him, a better coach. I think that I was actually thinking earlier today, David. I can't even imagine a scenario. I don't care how things go where we ever fire him.
You know what? I was thinking about that too. With so many teams looking around for coaches, I was like, thank God he's still got half of his contract to go, and teams won't be looking to come and try and poach him because we have hit the jackpot with him and Jones as duo right now. And look at us, Phoenix Suns, a stable environment in the NBA while other teams burn down. It's nice to be on the other side. It made me think of the Coach Bud, although I know you just said that Milwaukee beat the Nets tonight, but Bud was using us when we hired Igor, and you know, if he took the job in Phoenix, we probably wouldn't have got Monty Williams, which is a nice, I guess, sliding doors moment not to think about, Max. But you touched on it there with the Chris Paul moment, which I thought was really special. But did you see Isaiah Thomas's tweet on that moment between Chris Paul and Monty Williams?
No. What did he say?
So there was a video, you know, a cutout of the Chris Paul, Monty Williams, you know, adoration for each other, how much Chris was there in the dark moments of Monty's life, and how much they've shared a connection even before this Phoenix time. And Isaiah quoted it and said, "Not at all surprised by this. Monty was there every step of the way in my dark moments," which I assume was the combination of his injury and his sister passing away. And then he ended it with saying, "And Monty didn't even know me that well."
Wow, that is crazy.
And I was gobsmacked, because everyone knows the Chris Paul Monty story. You know, they started together, you know, early on, head coach and player in the league. So, you know, even though it's still amazing, it's not all that surprising. Whereas that one floored me so much more.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. That just shows you the reputation he has around the league, and like his influence on the whole league, right?
Yeah.
It's really amazing. And honestly, we should just go into one of my big things. This is exactly where I want to go.
Go for it.
With it. It's really just the state of the Phoenix Suns franchise right now in general.
Yep.
As you sort of alluded to there, half the league is on fire right now. Dallas, Portland, Boston, New Orleans are among teams looking for coaches. Milwaukee might be soon. If they lose Game 7, I think he's gone. Like, Dallas is literally just overall imploding, the whole entire thing. Philly might be trading their second best player soon, and also isn't very happy with the coach. With all this going on, like this unprecedented level of uproar, like, we're doing this during that.
Yeah.
And just think about how important that is for the future of our team in general. Like, I know we're all excited about this year. Obviously, we should be. We have a chance to win the whole thing. But, like, we also shouldn't lose sight of, like, what this year means going forward. Like, the Phoenix Suns are just straight up back. Like, we're going to be able to recruit. We got Chris Paul and Jay Crowder already, and what Jay Crowder said, I'm sure you saw this, that, like, I look really smart now for signing with the Suns, don't I?
Yeah, he called himself a genius.
He called himself a genius. Players are seeing all this, man. Players also see our fan base going viral over and over, which I want to get to.
Yep.
Brand new renovated stadium facility. James Jones, in addition to Monty Williams, who you just talked about. Both, player-friendly guys that are proving themselves now. Like, David, how many teams are in a better situation than us over the next few years?
There's not many. There's definitely not. And we I remember 12 months ago hoping that it could all come, at the right time with the new facility and stuff, and they just needed the on-court product to match it, I suppose, to attract people. And we've been that dormant market, that dormant fan base, that dormant franchise for so long. And I think we're going to see it. Hopefully they can, for instance, nail their mid-level signing again next year and add another piece to this team, because the sky's the limit when everyone else starts paying attention to the Phoenix Suns.
One other thing I want to mention, just in terms of like how important this has been for our future, is that we now know for a fact that Booker, Ayton, and Mikal bring it in the playoffs. That's an established fact.
Yes.
We didn't know that before. And so that, combined with just everything else going on, the fact that we could win the title this season, it can't be understated how important this is. This might just change the entire next 20 years of the Phoenix Suns.
I'm with you. Maybe I'll even make it out one of these years, Max, because the product's looking a hell of a lot better at the moment.
It certainly looks worth it. All right, let's go to your thing next, because that was a long one.
I had two left. I'm going to cut one.
Okay.
Just looking at the time, we're about on our traditional 1.5 hours here, even though it's a 2-part episode. Porter, I've covered more than enough. I'll probably link some stuff in the link to this podcast that I did throughout the series. Just, I haven't seen a more targeted guy on defense in recent memory from what the Suns did to Porter, but anyone listening to this has probably seen me break down that more than enough. So I'll go to Jokic again, and it kind of just dovetails from our conversation with DeAndre Ayton and how impressive he was. It wasn't exactly rocket science, Max, but I think we nailed the approach in the preview episode and wanted to kind of pat ourselves on the back here. We said we needed to make him a scorer and make someone else step up. The difference between the Portland series and the Phoenix series was no one else did step up this time around, whereas he had Austin Rivers and a few others in the last series. I'll just read out a few things here. In the regular season per 36, he had 18.7 field goal attempts and 8.7 assists. In the Portland series, that jumped all the way to 24.2 field goal attempts, but just 4.6 assists. But he was efficient, so it worked. In the Phoenix series, 23.1 field goal attempts and 6.2 assists.
Yep.
But the important thing here is he was really inefficient and not aggressive, because in the regular season, he shot 56% from the field and 39% from three, whereas Phoenix, it dropped all the way down to 48% and 28%, and even 68% from the free throw line when he was 87% in the regular season. But his threes went up 1.4 a game, and his free throws went down by 1 a game, which just tells me that he was nowhere near as aggressive as he likes to be, and that has to be credit to DeAndre Ayton and the Phoenix Suns for making him settle for shots that he wouldn't normally settle for, Max.
Absolutely. I do want to go back to you saying we were really good in the last podcast. I do think we were really good. In terms of, like, I think we not only nailed that Jokic let the pass, but, like, I went through, like, why their guards didn't scare me, and that looks good.
Yep.
In retrospect. But, I mean, not to pat ourselves back too much, though. I did say Torrey Craig wouldn't be a big series for him, so not everything was good. Not everything's great.
We get a lot wrong, but we admit that,
Yeah.
You've got to give yourself the pat on the back when you get it right occasionally, too.
Yeah,
Max.
just call it how it is, even if it's talking about yourself, right?
Yep.
And also what you're talking about dovetails so well into one of my things, which we can insert in the middle of yours because it's small. It's about Jokic. David, was Jokic actually good in Game 3? Like, I know he had 32 points, 20 rebounds, and 10 assists, and a lot of people made fun of me on Twitter for saying that Ayton owned him after that. But, like, he was 13 of 29. Didn't go back and watch all of his assists, but he had the ball the entire time. Some of those had to just be, like, passing out to somebody.
Yeah.
9 of his points and 3 of his assists came in the fourth when the game was out of reach. Like, David, here's my question to you. Was there a single moment in the entirety of Game 3 where you were like, oh, man, Jokic might beat us by himself here? I'm really concerned.
I'm not sure there was a single moment in the whole series, after, other than maybe, and it's in hindsight, I already knew the result. Watching that Game 1 again, they did come out of the blocks pretty hard, and I kind of remember being like, oh, shit, we might be on for a series here. I guess it's just an illustration of Jokic's game. If no one else is stepping up, he becomes so much less scary because you don't have to worry about the backdoor cuts, things opening up for him because others are making shots and stuff. So, yeah, I think your point's valid. That I really don't believe there was any moment of this series where I felt like he was on top of the Phoenix Suns and dictating the game, and that's just further credit to the Suns.
You made a great point there in terms of, like, Jokic needs to feed off somebody.
Yes.
Like, if Jamal Murray was there, it's not just adding Jamal Murray back, it's also making Jokic much better. I think people underlook how much that whole thing mattered. Like, I think if we would have played that team against with Murray, I'm not saying we would have lost. I think it would have been 7 games and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Anything else on Jokic? I mean, I think everything you're saying is right. I think, got to credit Ayton. I guess we should not. I guess we definitely should credit Ayton with that. I mean, Jokic was forced into a lot of shots he wasn't comfortable taking. It was quite obvious, especially in the mid range.
Yeah.
And that I credit that to Ayton.
Yep, he just exhausted him, but we already touched on that quite a lot. So let's round it out with, I think, your last point here, Max.
Yep. It's going to be like a mini 5 stars, but for Phoenix Suns fan things from the series.
Love it.
So I'm going to give you, you don't have to rank all 5. I'm going to give you 5.
Okay.
But you don't have to rank, just rank the first, like, 2, like your 5-star and 4-star.
Okay.
So from Game 1, the alley-oop to Craig, the eruption.
Yep.
Game 2, the rip-off shirt kid.
Yep.
Game 3, Suns in 4, Gladiator in the stands.
Yep.
Game 4, Suns fans take over Denver Stadium. And then, you already mentioned it earlier, throughout the whole series, the 5th one, just chugging with the fellas throughout the whole thing.
I wrote those down as you were saying them. I'm going to try and rank them 5 through 1 here, even though you said I didn't have to, Max.
Okay. Okay. I like it.
It feels so long ago, but I've got to go with it. The kid taking his shirt off is one of the funniest things I've ever seen during a Phoenix Suns game, and it was just so innocent, and, like, yeah, that's 5 stars for me. I'm going to go chugging with the fellas. Anyone listening, if you haven't got involved, look up the hashtag on Twitter, donate to the charity involved if you can. I'm going 4 stars for chugging with the fellas because offline or off the court and amongst the fan base, I reckon it's one of the best things that has happened. Shout out to Serge, Chase, and Caitlin, who have all been involved in that. I'm going to go... I got to go Suns in 4 guy with 3 stars. I tossed and turned on this one to begin with because, I don't want to be involved or condoning fighting or violence, but the more that you found out about that story, it kind of seemed warranted. And him ending it the way that he did. I saw him do an interview yesterday as well where they noted, thank God the Suns actually got it done in 4 because it brings so much better context to that. Like, we probably all would have forgotten about him in a week's time if it went 5 or 6 games. So the Suns definitely backed him up on that one. Did you see quickly, Jay Crowder said in a podcast that they actually watched it live coming out of a timeout?
Yes, I did see that. Yeah, they're like, what's going on out there? Of course, they didn't know what the Suns in 4 part of it, but they saw it. I did see that. I'm
going to go takeover in Denver 2, just because the moment that Chris Paul had with the crowd after the game, as someone who sits on the other side of the world, I found that really special. I almost feel bad only giving it 2 stars.
Yep.
And I feel bad giving the Torrey Craig dunk only 1 star, but I'm guessing that if I lived in Phoenix and was at that game, I would feel much differently about that, because I would have been one of the 15,000 or whatever it was absolutely erupting in the stadium, Max.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those ones. There's no right answers here. They're all great, and I wanted to illustrate this. My order to yours is probably pretty similar. Ribov Shurkin, I feel bad that he got overshined a little bit by what happened in Suns in 4. Like, that was hilarious and insane. Like, that was just pure raw goodness. Like, and you can't watch that. And even the grandma behind him, so good. So good.
Amazing. Absolutely
I might
amazing.
have had Suns fans take over Denver Stadium first, Steven.
Ooh.
Like, that was amazing. Did you see the videos of the concourse after?
Yeah, it was.
Or Let's Go Suns chants?
Yeah. It was really cool.
Unbelievable. What it also made me think, like, man, if we do play the Clippers and we have home court advantage, plus, like, we go there and probably have half the stadium, like, that's going to be something. Like, LA's even closer than Denver. They don't have any fans in LA.
That's very true. I hadn't thought that far ahead yet, but yeah, it might be home court for all. I was going to say all 7 games, but let's just go all 4 games, Max.
I like that. Suns in 4, baby. But yeah, the reason I wanted to point that out is the fact that there's 5 of those moments and from all the games, and, like, it's that great. Just shows you how important I think the fans are going to be going forward. Like, what's going on with the fans and the team right now isn't normal. It's not just normal, like, that people are excited because it's the playoffs.
Yeah.
This is a special connection between a team and a city right now that is rare, and I think that it's absolutely going to be a factor going forward.
I absolutely love that you've ended the podcast with this point, because I couldn't agree more. I think it comes from Devin Booker's connection to the city and the way he's embraced, and we're seeing it these last couple of days with Luka and Zion and the murmurings. We never had to deal with that with Devin Booker, and we're just so happy that he's being paid back, and I guess the fan base is being paid back for 10 years of severe disappointment at the moment. And I totally agree with you. It's a great point to end the pod on. It's a really special thing happening. I know we've mentioned it a few times, but we just shouldn't take this for granted. It's just an amazing run, Max.
Yeah, I can't remember if I said this in the podcast or not, but I think something to put it in perspective, at least for me, is like, even if Brooklyn wins the title this year, Brooklyn Nets fans, I promise you, won't get as much joy out of what's happened this postseason that we have.
Agreed.
Even if the Western Conference Finals doesn't go well. It's like some of the things that are happening right now are almost like more bonding and fun than the title, although I really want a freaking title at the end of this. But it's really special, and I just hope everyone's appreciating it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. We've gone past the hour and a half. Let's cut it off. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you and the listeners in a few days, though, again, Max.
Yep, thanks for listening, guys. We'll be back way sooner than we usually ever are, especially nowadays. So look forward to that.